This is Fusion Capitalism, a clean energy vision for conservatives. Brought to you by industry leader and company CEO, Steve Malink. Here's Steve.
Thanks for joining me for the second part of my discussion with Mark Rothleder, the Senior Vice President and Chief Operating Officer at California ISO. Mark, in part one, we talked about the work your ISO is doing in California, and now I'd like to get into climate change, clean energy, and how your organization can serve as a leader for the U.S. and world. Can you give us an overview of what your plans are in these areas? For example, what is the current percentage of clean energy on your grid, and what do you expect that percentage to be in 2030?
So right now we probably are in excess of 33% of the demand is being served in California by clean energy. And we achieved that goal probably last year, a little bit ahead of time. And the goals going forward are by 2030 is really to have, I believe it's 60% of the energy being served by renewable or clean energy. With the ultimate goal of trying to be 100% clean energy. Obviously, the challenge there is as you increase those targets, it gets increasingly more challenging as you transition from 33% to 60% to 100%. And you need more innovative solutions to achieve that. Just to put context around it, it's hard to visualize or intuitively understand what's 33% mean. There are particular slices of time, let's say spring of this year, where instantaneously there was 94% of the energy being served at that instantaneous point was being served by clean energy, carbon-free energy in California. And I'm pretty confident that in the next couple of years, we'll see periods where 100% of it is being served by clean energy. The point I'm trying to make, though, is that it's one thing to do that for an instantaneous in time. The challenge is how do you do that over the whole year, 87, 60 hours over the year? Because you need a diverse set of resources that are able to produce when the demand exists and provide security and be responsive when you need it to be when you lose those resources. Coming back to my earlier discussion of we need operating reserves in case of a contingency event, well, you can't just ramp up wind or solar when you need it because you're already using everything you can get at the time. So you need a certain amount of dispatchable resources that are able to respond to conditions when you need it.
Mm-hmm. And that will be best served by natural gas peaker plants?
In the near term, certainly gas plants play that role because you can dispatch them on demand. For the most part, the gas is there when you need it, and those are the sources of those ramping resources. Not the only source. Hydro provides some of that ramping and security capability because you can ramp up hydro when you need it. But it's also looking at other new innovative resources. And I'll use an example. Batteries are now part of that solution. It's not a large part of the solution, but it is a very much increasing part of the solution. And I say batteries, it's more generally storage. Being able to store energy is a new innovative approach to the electric industry because everything prior to this was you use it when it's needed and you produce it when it's needed. Being able to store it allows you to think about it in just in terms of solar resources. There's times where we have excess solar, surplus solar energy because it's more than what we need. If you could store that clean energy and then use it for another period when you are scarce energy, and batteries and storage more generally are useful because you can ramp them up and dispatch them when you need them. That becomes now an innovative new addition, clean solution to the challenge. Now, are we at scale yet? We've got about 27,000 megawatts of installed gas capacity. that we ramp up probably 10,000 megawatts of it over 3 hours every day in the evening when the sun goes down. um, we right now have about 1,500 megawatts of batteries. So there is a significant amount of infrastructure additions that we need to make to shift from the reliance on things like gas resources to a set of new
Hmm.
innovative resources that are clean.
And I've got another question on battery storage, but before I ask that, I'd like to go back to fossil fuels.
Sure.
Do California utilities still operate coal plants as part of its energy mix? And if yes, when do you see them phasing out?
So they don't operate any coal resources effectively right now. There are some coal resources in the West that they have contractual rights to. They are quickly ramping out and getting off those arrangements. And so you could view California as almost nearly not relying on
Mm.
coal
Hmm.
resources at this point. Now, we are part of, again, the
Hmm.
interconnected system. So
Sure.
when you are importing in at any given time, is something is a coal resource potentially somewhere out there supporting that? Potentially, but we do have mechanisms to try to account for that and minimize that so that we are importing as a clean set of resources and capacity as we can.
Hmm.
The rest of the West is in the process of this transition too. I think California and has demonstrated and kind of led the way in terms of moving to a clean set of resources, but there are clean initiatives across the West. And so the mix of resources, not just in California, but across the West, are changing.
Hmm. So we have a growing electric vehicle market. They all use batteries for powering cars and trucks. Do you envision ever seeing that battery storage capacity as being used for the grid in the future?
Great question. So yeah, I do. And it's not just the electric vehicles, but certainly as you transition away from gas for heating and gas for other purposes, other sectors may actually provide the ability to give you new tools to actually dispatch and manage this, again, constant balancing of supply and demand. The challenge there is, at least for electric vehicles, is certainly sending energy back up to the grid from the electric vehicles. I think has some effects on the battery life, and certainly the car manufacturers are very sensitive about ensuring that their batteries are used effectively. The potential is there. How you manage it and how well you do it is, I think, the challenge there. What you can do, though, is short of sending energy back up from the electric vehicles back up to the grid, what you can do is manage how fast you charge them or when you charge them.
Mm.
And I think that is an immediate
Hmm.
solution, uh,
Hmm.
either through pricing or whatever, shifting from charging your battery when you get home to charging your car vehicle at the office when we have surplus energy because solar production is so high in the middle of the day is an immediate solution for helping navigate the challenge.
Yeah. That leads me to the next question. D- does the California ISO have any say on whether utilities offer time of day electricity pricing? And the reason I ask that question is because it kind of relates to what you just said. It used to be that best rates were at night when demand is lowest, but with
Mhm.
solar power becoming more prevalent, I guess will the best rates shift to the day when supply is highest?
So within the electricity framework in California, we're not the regulator for those utilities and those retail rates. That said, we have engaged in the California Public Utility Commission's rate making processes to advise them and advocate for time of use rate or dynamic rates that reflect those system conditions. So, to your point exactly, if you have in the evening when people come home and the sun is coming down, maybe the prices are higher. And if the consumer saw that, it would incentivize them to shift some of their things that they're doing to the middle of the day where prices are lower now. because you've got that abundant amount of clean and then on the margin, uh, relatively cheap energy to produce. So yes, we advocate for that, but we do not make up those rates.
I see. In terms of total electricity produced from renewables, California is currently number one, according to the U.S. Energy Information Administration. I understand that the current administration is planning for a 100% clean energy grid by 2035. I think you said that by 2030, you expect California's grid to get up to like 60 to 70%. How quickly do you expect the Golden State to get to 100% clean energy on the grid?
I think it's accelerating, and I think the pressures are increasing to do that. And when I say the pressures, I mean that in various aspects. One is the economic pressure is there. It's economic in terms of new capacity. It's relatively cheap to build solar than it is to look at other capabilities or other fossil-based resources. So the natural economics are driving us to that clean energy. Obviously, trying to manage climate change and reduce the carbon footprint and the impacts of climate change is accelerating us in that direction. So I see this as continuing to accelerate, and maybe it's not coming through, but I think we actually are going to see the electricity sector actually help other sectors, whether it be the electric vehicle or transportation sector or the heating sector, building sector, actually decarbonize as well. And as a result of that, you almost have to accelerate and overbuild the new renewable or clean energy capacity because your actual demand for electricity is going to increase. And there's some estimates that it'll increase as much as 60% in the next 20 years because other sectors are moving away from fossil fuels and using electricity to do that. Well, if you're gonna do that, you've got to accelerate the build and be ready for the additional demand on the system.
Mark, last question. In your opinion, does the U.S. have all the technologies it needs to meet the needs of the 21st century, or do we still need some future solution, whether it be hydrogen, low-cost nuclear, or even fusion power?
Yeah, if you where we stand today, I think the potential for those technologies to do it exist. Are they developed and at scale? No. And so we do need some technological breakthroughs, some cost breakthroughs to achieve that in my mind. We are using whatever technology that exists today, whether it be batteries and so forth, but there needs to be other developments. And you mentioned a few, the use of hydrogen, moving away from gas to a clean hydrogen solution is one of those things. But there may be even technologies that don't even exist today that will be developing over the next 10 to 20 years that will be the new breakthroughs to achieving that. You mentioned nuclear. Maybe small nuclear situated somewhere in the West will actually be part of that solution. I don't know, but certainly having these goals is certainly a engine for innovation. And I think, like I said, the amount of demand for clean energy is going to be increasing. The pace of it's going to be increasing, and I just see innovation responding to that need.
Mark, thank you very much. That was a very informative set of answers. I know that our audience, most people are relatively they're late people when it comes to this kind of information. So I think you've really kind of made it easier for the average person to understand how our grid operates. So thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much. I know it's a little bit of you just expect your electricity to be there. You don't know how it's produced.
Yeah.
And there's a lot behind the scenes, a lot of people working on this to make sure that not only is it reliable, but it's clean and affordable.
Well, wonderful. Thanks again for your time, and have a good day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for listening to Fusion Capitalism. To find out more about Steve Malink and his book, go to fusioncapitalism.com. This has been a production of Forbes Books Radio.